Hi, I'm Mark Walker, and welcome to Fierce Encouragement. This is your weekly guide to mastering your mindset, finding mental balance, and building a stronger, more positive self-image. Now, I created this podcast for leaders and lifelong learners, people like yourself who are ready to bring more clarity and purpose to their goals and their projects in life. Now, each episode is grounded in modern scientific insights and even ancient wisdom practices, giving you some powerful strategies to help move forward with confidence and focus in your own life. So let's tap into your potential, let's cut through that noise, and let's create a life of meaning and leadership that feels inspiring and aligned. It's time to embody fierce encouragement, starting right now. So thank you for joining me on this episode of Fierce Encouragement. Today I wanted to talk about how we can move past a thing called recency bias and use self-compassion in action, use that virtue of self-caring and self-compassion in motion. So the first thing to kind of address, what is recency bias? And you might be familiar with it, but it's just that tendency of our minds to weigh more heavily the experiences we've just have or had, the experiences around us, and it can often kind of distort the way we work on ourselves in the bigger picture, right? So our recency bias is that of amplifying or increasing some of those negative feelings, especially when we have setbacks, when we get laid off, when we get discouraged or projects aren't going our way. And sometimes, and oftentimes, I find it can lead to this really harsh criticism of yourself and sometimes that of lashing out at others. An example for this would be something where you just where your workday is overshadowed by one bad meeting or one bad day that week. You might have made progress the other 4 or 5 days of the week, but just that one bad meeting, that one bad interaction kind of feels like it hovers over our whole week, the good and bad quality of our week. So we kind of have that bias. We can have that negative recency bias that'll hang over our head a little bit. And when we find that we're there, one thing that I've been bringing into my coaching practice and that of my work on myself and with my coaches, I like to remember this great book I've been reading and kind of finished up in the past month. It's Paul Gilbert's book called The Compassionate Mind. Another coach recommended it to me. It was just amazing. It's a long, intricate book, but has a ton of valuable tools in it and a bunch of great insights on how we can kind of relate to and get perspective on our own self and our kind of default modes in our brain. So obviously, or maybe not so obviously to you, we have a threat or protection system in our brain. And it activates so often that it runs on autopilot sometimes. If we're struggling during days and have this negative predisposition or this negative recency bias, we can really start to wear ourselves out by staying kind of in this threat protection system when we're struggling, when we're having bad days, when we talk to ourselves or have that negative recency bias. And we just need to understand this is a default mode that our brain has to protect itself. I think Dr. Gilbert does a great job of that, reminding the readers, and sharing it with you to consider the biological mechanisms of your brain and kind of having shown up here and having the brain that you have, we forget kind of with that recency bias what we are swimming in from a biological perspective. We're really small beings in a big pond, and sometimes we're really overly harsh and critical of ourselves, especially if we don't get things right or if we don't achieve those things that kind of society or others have set up for us and we kind of put upon ourselves. So really be aware of the brain's default modes, especially with regards to threat protection systems, and then get curious about how you can engage your soothing system, your recovery system in your brain. So number one is to know what's going on. You found yourself in this crazy game of life. You might have some other disadvantages that were placed at your feet. But the fact that you're alive and learning and listening to a podcast and maybe reading books and working on yourself in small measure is a really positive thing. So give yourself that credit. Activate that soothing system, those things that help you regulate your stress. And I am not talking about surfing more Instagram or checking more Facebook posts. I'm talking about things that help you literally soothe. Reading, walking, doing one single thing at a time without overdoing it. Creative projects, reading your poetry. Maybe it is just a simple walk without inputs and without the phones and podcasts in our ears. So yeah, take a walk without this podcast afterwards. The big benefit here is that self-compassion and remembering how to soothe our nervous system and understand when we're in that threat protection system. Self-compassion is actually a very powerful antidote or a powerful medicine for this deceit with the negative recency bias that we can fall into. When we build up our self-compassion, it is not about getting weaker. Paradoxically, it is building up resilience and helping us build more mental strength and move forward constructively in our lives. The benefit of self-compassion is strength, not weakness, and it helps us move forward in our lives. A big distinction when we can kind of dig into the purpose or the reason why we practice self-compassion. It isn't just flowers and rainbows and candy canes. It's when we find ourselves pissed off or having a bad day and we ask ourselves, how can I be kind to myself right now? And how can I move forward with a positive or at least a neutral mindset? Just get through this. Use some of those soothing activities to help our nervous system deregulate. The third point I kind of wanted to bring up in talking about this recency bias and self-compassion is kind of putting it all into action. And I kind of touched on this, but it's really seeing through the lens of a bigger picture of kind of, again, thinking back to our whole lives, how we can create a good life is just by recommitting and trying to get better today. So we reframe our struggles through this big picture, this bigger lens. Really shift our perspective. So I would encourage you, and obviously I encourage myself when I do self-coaching, when I coach with my coaches, but encourage myself to listen to myself and see how I'm viewing the struggles that I've had recently. Sometimes they can be part of a big chunk of growth in my life, and sometimes I'll devalue them and, look at them as failures. And honestly, as I go through the end of this year, calendar year 2024, and do a lot of unpacking and planning for the next year, when I listen and look at what I've tried to accomplish and where I fail and came up short, it feels really heavy. But for me, in listening to what is important to me, is to see these not as definitive failures, but opportunities to win and learn and grow. So we need to think of practical examples in our own life. Where are your struggles right now? Maybe recently, or maybe kind of over the last 2 or 3 months, or maybe this year. And ask yourself, are you seeing those as failures or chances to learn and grow? Think of practical examples in your life where you can relate this and how you can reframe your own negative perceived events into opportunities of learning and growing. Very big tool, very big viewpoint, a very big reframe we can bring into our day-to-day. And this mental toughness tool that I want to share at the end, I'm big into meditation. I've been practicing it for a decade plus, and I've had some great teachers, some amazing teachers. And I really think that deregulation, one of the deregulation things we can do is just stop, pause, and breathe. So I'm calling this mental toughness tool the compassionate pause. For the first step, we just pause it and name it. So if you're with me right now and you want to practice, obviously be careful if you're operating heavy machinery, but slow down and pause and name a recent negative experience that you had. Just briefly bring up those feelings that you had, frustration, maybe you're upset at the other person. Just kind of pause it and see it and name it. Second step is to bring in some self-compassion, that check-in. What would you say to yourself if you were a close, dear personal friend? What would you say to your dear friend if they were going through this exact same thing? So get outside yourself. What would you say to somebody, a close dear friend that was going through what you're going through right now? And then I want you simply to turn the tables. I want you to apply that same kind of kindness and encouraging tone, or at least neutral tone, to yourself. Check in compassionately with yourself. How would you treat a dear friend? Treat yourself like that. Step 3, shift your focus. So I want you to reflect on 3 positive or at least neutral moments from the past week. I want you to reflect on 3 positive moments to kind of rinse out this difficult negative experience. So think of 3 positive or at least neutral moments, and where you can have that influence of recency bias in a positive nature. What 3 positive things happened this past week? And then honestly, taking 2 or 3 really deep breaths with me right now. Again, being careful wherever you're at, practicing this with wisdom. Breathing down deep into the belly and kind of letting that out breath go longer than our in breath was. And just practicing a couple more of those nice, deep, relaxing breaths. Checking in with any tightness you might have in your face or shoulders or in your hands, and see if you can just relax that physical body as you take one more deep breath. And that's it. That is like our pausing mechanism. I'm calling it the compassionate pause. It was really inspired by Paul Gilbert and his book, The Compassionate Mind, an amazing book if you're interested in going deeper on some of the self-compassion practices and some of the biology and science behind what he's been studying for many decades now. Otherwise, bring to mind that recency bias that we can have, especially regarding negative things, and ask ourselves if we can just shift our perspective and use that reframing our struggles by looking at a bigger picture and ask what we want from this day or from this project or from this relationship. And when we start to do that, we can literally bring our creative brain online and start to think of ways we can work on this instead of just be caught by it. Again, thank you very much for checking in and listening to Fierce Encouragement today. It really means a lot to me to share this stuff with you, and in hopes that you'll actually go out and practice this. Actually, I just wrote a post this morning. Somebody said that I'll continue to learn because knowledge is wisdom. And I kind of politely disagreed and said, I think wisdom is a practice of knowledge. So no matter what we're learning or what you're listening to on any podcast or reading in any book or finding in any areas of your life, pause and ask yourself if you really want to practice these things, if you really want to practice the compassionate pause in your own life, and put it into play. When we take action, when we put these tools into play, only then can we start to feel the shifts that we really want to have in our life, and bringing out those better results or those better relationships or that better career or that milestone that we're going after. And so honestly, thank you. Quickly, I'm a coach. I help leaders who are driven to hit those big milestones and still feel like they're, doing good. There's so much anxiety and fear and people that have that imposter syndrome, like they're faking it, that they're lost. But I really help people get more balance in their work and their hobbies and their families. We're all so disconnected, and something deeper is missing. And I've seen it in my clients, I've seen it in myself, and I've been working at it for years. So I strive to help people quiet that chaos, get past the surface level BS in their life, and help really build some authenticity and some resilience in their life. So what's your next big goal? What's your next big target? Grab a free strategy session with me at markwalkercoach.com. I'll include the link in the show description. But let me know how I can help support you in your quest to put these tools into play, to be wise, to feel better sooner instead of to wait for another year. I mean, really, how much is it costing you to sign up for a free strategy session and see what coaching is about, see what accountability is about, and see what it's like to have somebody support you unconditionally? You're really worth it. It's worth the time. It's worth the effort. Practice that self-compassion. Let go of that negative recency bias. And I hope to see you down the line. Take care of yourself and reach out. Okay, talk soon. Bye-bye.